MegaMan Legends was a pioneer in terms of 3D gameplay. It was creative, charming, forward-thinking, but overall clunky. Having since been cast aside for being a poorly aged game in the advent of 3D technology, it was a victim during a time when developers were all trying to figure out how to make movement, exploration, and combat engaging with the new axis. But in the coming years, even by the end of the PlayStation's life, these problems were met with solutions. Not only did the Legends team have 2 projects to look back on, but numerous other success stories that came up with legitimately good ideas themselves. Capcom had the time, the team, and the passion to go through with taking the framework of MegaMan Legends to a more realized result. In Japan, the game was called Rockman-2, Episode 2, The Great Inheritance. So you're probably thinking, Episode 2? Oh, like how this is the second game and a direct continuation of the first, so that makes Legends 1 Episode 1, right? No! Included with the misadventures of Tron Bonne was also a demo for the upcoming MegaMan Legends 2, just some levels cut out of the main game. In Japan though, this demo featured a variety of scenarios that you wouldn't find in the actual game. Thus the demo goes by the moniker of Rockman-2 Episode 1, Roll's Critical Moment. The thing the demo was most famous for was a story where Tron kidnaps Roll and Mega Man has to rescue her. Despite it being a short story, it retains all the heart and production quality that goes into creating the Legends games. But by far the best thing about the demo is how Tron offers Mega Man to join with her pirates. And he actually considers what that would be like. Well, in case you're wondering, you don't need to play Episode 1 to understand any underlying context for Legends 2 proper. In fact, one could argue that it's technically not necessary to know the story of Legends 1 in order to understand where the story goes for this game. I don't completely agree though. It's true there's nothing specific you can't learn by picking up details here and there, but you're in for a wild ride if you don't know who the characters are. Our story kicks off 1 year after the events of MegaMan Legends, and a lot has been happening off-screen. Introductions are in order, so say hello to Werner von Blücher. Blücher is an old digger friend of Barrel Casket, and he's about to make shockwaves to the world. Aboard his personal ship, the Sulphur Bottom, he is holding his own press conference. A whole crowd of reporters have come in to see what Blücher has to say, including a few familiar pirates. After all, if it's treasure they're talking, then that's profit, baby. The Bonds apparently tried to leave the pirate life behind and restart as shop owners, but they need extra funding to keep the business afloat. Glide also returns from the misadventures of Tron Bonne, to the chagrin of Teasel. Joining them is also Claymore, a previously retired pirate roped back in for one last haul. And it's fortunate they're all present. The news Blücher is about to reveal is the whereabouts of the Mother Lode. Cut back to the flutter, and Mega Man has since made breakfast, and oh my goodness, voice actor change!
Roll, breakfast ready. I made the eggs just the way you like them.
Boy, that's gonna be weird to get used to. Anyway, where were we? Ah, right, breakfast. Mega Man has made some breakfast for Roll as she's noticeably bummed out. It makes sense though. She was driven to find the Mother Lode herself as a means of hopefully finding out what happened to her missing parents. It's honestly a little heartbreaking to see. But at least she's in her pajamas. Seriously, look at this outfit, it's so cute! Leave it to the Legends team to give a character their best design for one scene in the game. Mega Man decides to turn on the TV to watch the press conference. Blücher informs everyone that he has reason to believe the Mother Lode is within the premises of Forbidden Island, a place constantly surrounded by a raging storm that swallows up any ships that try to breach it. Honestly, I don't know why this is news the Mother Lode could be found here. I mean, it's an impenetrable place called Forbidden Island, but hey, details. Blücher and Barrel have been the only ones to set foot on, then subsequently escape the island. And this time they're taking everyone aboard the Sulphur Bottom with them, for a first-hand report on their findings. Blücher opens the floor to anyone with questions, but there's this one reporter in particular that asks what the two believe the Mother Lode actually is. Barrel rather solemnly answers the questions until he realizes who's asking. Someone named Matilda? When it finally gets revealed that something isn't right, this Matilda then gives a warning to everyone on board. That the Mother Lode isn't the thing people think it is, and threatens the safety of all the passengers. The guards go open fire, but she makes a daring escape aboard what appears to be a flying reaver bot. Cutting back to the flutter, all of Roll's depression is instead replaced with confusion as she tells MegaMan the enigmatic Matilda woman that threatened the Sulphur Bottom was apparently her mother? Well, the two give chase to find out exactly what happened at the Sulphur Bottom and determine what exactly is going on. And thus begins MegaMan Legends 2. That's right, all of that was nearly 10 minutes of cutscene, and it happens before you even start playing the game. I suppose that gives us some time to talk about the story presentation. Overall, there have been a lot of improvements made. The cutscenes are still presented in engine, but the in-game graphics have seen a massive upgrade since the original Legends. This is by far one of the best looking polygonal games on the PlayStation, which is to be expected of a 2000 release. But just by watching the opening, you can tell that a lot more is going on in this game. Compared to the whimsical tone of the previous games, Legends 2 starts out a lot more somber and mysterious. On average, the cutscenes are much more informative with how much they tell the player, for both good and for bad. Like how we can tell that Beryl isn't very enthusiastic about Blucher's expedition, considering he lost his own children to the same island. Some of what Matilda in particular is saying doesn't really make sense to us right now, but there are still huge story hooks that people can get invested with pretty quickly. MegaMan starts piloting the ship en route to the Sulphur Bottom, but he gets distracted by Data. This is a detriment to the already inept pilot. Thankfully, Roll comes in and oh my goodness, look at her coat! The audacity of this girl, not having one, but two greatest character designs ever, and we haven't even played the game yet! After taking over the ship, she confesses she's unsure if her true parents are actually alive. But even still, MegaMan gave her hope that one day she would find the answer she's looking for. Aww. Well, Data then channels the wills of all the MegaMan and Tron shippers in the world and causes him to set the entire flutter on fire! This allows us to get a tutorial on how to use special weapons. This time, instead of one energy bar that continually drains, there is a total ammo capacity and a cooldown bar. When the cooldown bar depletes, then it needs to recharge. I'll be honest, I get the intent, but I don't like the system. I think this was done to not have players be over-reliant on their special weapons and have some reason to swap between using their Mega Buster and special weapon. But it just slows the combat pacing down, if anything. By the time they arrive at the location of the Sulphur Bottom, Matilda then gives off more warning shots. But she damages the ship more than intended, and now the Sulphur Bottom sinks into the maelstrom of Forbidden Island. MegaMan and Roll are shocked and aren't quite sure what to do now, but both of them want to get inside and rescue everyone aboard the ship. Forbidden Island sounds like it's going to be a dangerous place. Who knows exactly what could be waiting there? But it sounds like we'll have no choice but to get there somehow, someday. We'll need to be well equipped to take out any threats in our way. Not that it's gonna be a problem for us. I put in work when it came to decking myself out with the strongest gear. A wide array of weapons at my very fingertips, landmines to lay as traps, an energy sword that can fire a shockwave to those out of reach, grenade launchers that spread destruction over a wide area, a homing missile launcher with unlimited ammo. Reaver bots and pirates alike will cower in fear at the mere mention of my...
I'm really sorry, MegaMan. I needed to upgrade the flutter. I'm afraid I sold all your equipment. Please forgive me.
You what? The energy canteen I needed for nourishment? All the special weapons that I paid you so much just for tune-ups? Wait a minute. You willingly sold the shining laser? Think about how dangerous that weapon was! It destroyed the final boss of the last game in like 2 seconds! What if the Bonds got a hold of that weapon and used it against us? Roll, what were you thinking? Oh well, I suppose it was inevitable that MegaMan was going to get Metroided somehow. It gives us a fresh start and there's at least an explanation as to why we don't have her old equipment. But now I'm worried that MegaMan's sister and maybe future wife might have just become a war profiteer. Well, the first step on our grand adventure is to land on Calinca Island. Roll needs parts so she can build something called a dropship, which was designed by her father a long time ago. Roll's parents also went on an expedition themselves to Forbidden Island 10 years ago. And Roll's dad figured that by creating a ship that was completely aerodynamic, it could penetrate the wind currents and land safely. So they go down to the local junk shop to buy some parts that can be used to make this.
Hey, wait. This dropship looks familiar. Are you friends of Joe?
Joe who?
Joe Papa.
They go to see this Joe person, but they just missed him, as he went into some nearby ruins to dig up the last few parts he needed. So Roll and MegaMan decide to follow him for some answers. Now it's time for our introduction dungeon. The controls for the original MegaMan Legends were, at best, hard to get used to. For being a pre-analog stick game on the PlayStation in regards to moving a character around in a 3D space, it was an admirable attempt to make the controls feel seamless. But over time, standards and expectations have been raised far above what Legends could provide. MegaMan Legends 2 was still limited by the PlayStation 1, but it was able to alter the physics to feel much more reliable. The framework of basic movement functions mostly the same, but Mega Man moves a bit more smoothly this time, making it a bit easier to maneuver around. Technological advancement also led to creating a more fluid experience, or in our case, the DualShock. Being able to take advantage of something as simple as an analog stick made a bigger deal than one might realize. This made moving around the world feel much more natural. It's astonishing how rewarding it is to collect Zenny from an exploding enemy now that players have finer precision to reap their reward. Some modern gamers may think it's still hard to get used to, but I can confidently say that the game plays much better than the original game. Combat is definitely something that is much more slow starting out, however. The Mega Buster's starting strength has been nerfed in comparison to the original game. Most notably, the firing speed of the bullets is pretty slow starting out. But I wouldn't be Lore Master Chris if I didn't have some hot tips for you newcomers. While holding square to fire the Buster gun, if you repeatedly mash up on the D-pad, it'll cancel out the animation and reset the gun immediately. Supposedly this trick was in the original Mega Man Legends as well, but I never seemed to reliably pull it off. In Legends 2 though, this exploit is much more simple. I'm not going to purposely pull it off in this run as I want to keep the intention of the RPG mechanics in check. Despite that, the general combat doesn't feel much slower. Careful observers will notice that Buster bullets no longer autocorrect to nearby enemies. This is because the manual lock-on is much more robust. Mega Man can now lock onto a target and move simultaneously. There are areas where the targeting priority is a bit unreliable or puts the camera in an awkward space, but 90% of the time it works well enough. Reaching the end of the dungeon, we find a badly damaged Joe, who warns us that the Reaverbot in the next room is active and could leave the ruins to destroy the town. So beat the boss with precision and grace, and afterwards you can take the giant refractor from the ruins. Joe then thanks us by giving Roll and Mega Man the dropship he made. Even though he doesn't remember anything of his past, he has a feeling the two were destined to use it. So now preparations are made and Mega Man deploys to Forbidden Island. And it really lives up to the name. There's a harsh snowstorm that makes it incredibly difficult to see. Reaverbots are everywhere, and Mega Man finds people crystallized in ice spheres. Is that a dropship? Who's that person inside? As Mega Man approaches the center of the island, he sees a giant purple prism above him, and a giant Reaverbot mammoth comes to defend it. The mammoth has an assortment of attacks, but nothing to be shaken up over. As this is another early game boss, it isn't too difficult to defeat. After doing so, the windstorm surrounding Forbidden Island dissipates, and the Sulphur bottom in the distance appears to be still in trouble, but it doesn't crash, so I guess it's fine. The diamond then opens up and comes two figures, an adult man and— oh my god, that is a naked lady! There was a naked lady with visible butt in my PlayStation game! Was this game rated again? E for everyone? Could have fooled me, more like E for horny. That's so stupid. Matilda and her companion Gats appear to be having a conversation about why Mega Man is going against the Master System when it was originally his job to enforce it. But before the two can reveal anything too crucial, they make their escape. Well, when they finally get covered up, the two that were entrapped within the prism introduce themselves. The silent one is named Sarah. Along with her companion Geets, the two claim to be ancients, ancestors of the modern world. If Blucher can locate them the various keys of Terra hidden across the world, they can unlock the way to the Mother Lode, which Sarah needs to do because she's sick or something, while Geets promises to reward Blucher with the ability to create an unlimited number of refractors. But because Blucher is apparently a lazy bastard that wants the glory but none of the work, he instead sticks Mega Man with the task of finding the keys for him and bringing him back to the Sulphur bottom. But the pirate crew isn't going to let anyone but themselves get the Mother Lode first. The four decide to split up and scout out the various islands where large ruins are located. So now we're pretty much out of the introduction of the game, and our grand adventure begins now. You know, this might be a little surprising to hear, but I'm actually not all that familiar with Mega Man Legends 2. I never had PlayStation consoles growing up, so Legends 1 is the game I'm way more familiar with. I might need a little bit of help on this one. After all, every good digger needs a spotter, right?
Yellow?
Hey, is this the MinimattReviews guy?
Yeah, you are speaking to him.
Hey Matt, it's me, Chris. I need you to be my spotter.
Wait, for like lifting weights or something?
No, Legends 2, you dummy.
Oh Lord, I'm coming!
We can start exploring the world more freely at this point, but here's where I personally felt like there was a slight missed opportunity for Legends 2. Like the first game, the story structure is completely linear, but the game presents that there are 4 different keys to find, and the pirate crew implies to split off and find them separately. What I think would have made the game much more interesting is if the developers let players tackle the 4 key ruins in any order they wanted. Considering that the Misadventures of Tron Bond was much more experimental with what missions you could do in your own desired order, I would have appreciated it more if they rethought this game in the same way. Then it would feel kinda like the old Mega Man games, where you could tackle the Robot Master stages in whatever order you like. Either way, I can't really say it bothers me. It's not a flaw or something that even disappoints me that much. I just think it would have been cooler if that's what the game did. But either way, this is the flow you can expect from the game. Each visit to an island is a new chapter in Mega Man Legends 2. You go to an island to solve whatever problem is happening in the overworld. Doing so will grant access to the main dungeon, and finishing the dungeon will reward a key and lead into a new island. It's a very simple method of pacing, but it's effective. Mega Man Legends 1 was very freeform, and even broke conventional tropes. It was a fresh take, and maybe not necessarily intentional, but it did risk feeling uneven for some players. So more people are likely to be comfortable playing Legends 2. Every island also has a different kind of scenario. One of the pirates will be trying to infiltrate the ruins and get the key inside. The story content could be anything from just a boss fight, a defense mission, or sometimes needing to go to an entirely different island. There's a great amount of variety between all the game's major set pieces. Sadly, the different pirate groups don't work together as much as I would like to, which is fine by itself. But even individually, the screen time that each pirate gets is lacking. I don't think it's a serious issue, but they don't get the time they need to create a lasting impression. The bonds are as strong as ever, which isn't surprising. It's nice to see Glide return, although he wasn't utilized to his full potential. Perhaps a moment where Mega Man could take advantage of an uneasy alliance between Glide and Teasel could have been greatly comedic. Claymore and Bola, the 2 new pirates introduced in Legends 2, barely get any scenes in the story, and also get unceremoniously dropped before the final act. That said, when any of the pirates enter the stage, it's great. And shoutouts to my favorite line of dialogue in any Mega Man game ever.
Mr. Teasel, we collected all the food and supplies and loaded them in the ship. What should we do with the toilet paper?
We may be pirates, but we're not barbarians. We'll let them keep the toilet paper.
Yes, sir!
Alright, Chris, here's what you're gonna need to know. This is the most dangerous ruin in the entire game. Dangerous foes at every corner, invisible traps everywhere. Your medicine bottle should be on the ready at all times.
Yo, check out this giant reaver bot!
Chris, stay away from that window.
Why? What's gonna happen?
See? That's what's going to happen. Now pick yourself up and continue going farther. Chris? Chris, are you there? Chris?
Now it's time to delve deep into some dungeons. Mega Man Legends 1 had pretty minimal dungeon concepts, perhaps to a fault. While Mega Man Legends 2 wasn't the grand step up one would hope, it did look to contemporary titles for inspiration. Mega Man Legends was one of the first attempts to create a 3D adventure title on a home console. But Mega Man Legends 2 came out after The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Although none of the dungeons in Mega Man Legends 2 were near the caliber of Zelda, the game was much more considerate in making each key ruin much more memorable. Every dungeon was based on a core theme, and utilized its space much more efficiently, requiring players to be a little bit more thorough and backtrack through previous areas. There are 4 story dungeons, and each is based on a specific elemental theme: forest, water, fire, and ice. The forest dungeon is simple and competently designed. Mega Man starts in a room hosting 3 doors, with 2 of them being locked. So the dungeon naturally funnels the player down a path while still making the environment feel organic. This dungeon also features quite a bit of backtracking. That being said, players are only required to backtrack after turning on power terminals, which increase the danger of the previous segments. This is a simple but clever design choice that makes it satisfying to overcome. If one is looking for complicated and idiotic design, then look no further than the water dungeon. The main gimmick of this segment has to do with raising and lowering water levels, which makes it easier to pick up heavy blocks to scale large walls. While that's already illogical, it's nothing compared to the results of raising the water levels. The game effectively runs at half speed while underwater. It would be one thing if the dungeon was strategically designed for players to effectively consider when to switch water levels, but it's not. Outside of debatably one instance, it's always more convenient to just have the water level raised at all times, so you don't need to continually go back and forth to raise it. As a result, this whole dungeon feels like it takes twice as long to complete as nearly every other segment in the game. And the worst part about this dungeon is that it's also mechanically inconsistent with the rest. In every other instance, when you get a key, you are immediately booted out of the dungeon to continue the adventure. In the water dungeon, this does not happen, so you need to clear every obstacle again, but this time in reverse. I don't know how this made it into the final game. Now the dungeon has twice the opportunity to leave a bad taste in the player's mouth. In contrast, the fire dungeon might even be my favorite in the game. The main hook of the dungeon is that you'll come into contact with this colossal reaverbot within the central room, meaning that you'll have to engage with it, and unfortunately, it is completely invincible. Diverging from the central room are paths that progress the dungeon in different ways, making this the most like a puzzle box. To break up the dungeon are also multiple little set pieces that are all reasonably interesting. There's only one thing about this dungeon that I even dislike, and unfortunately it is a really big mark against it. There are these floor trap enemies that will stop you in place and suck up your life. These things are everywhere and there's no hint as to when they will appear. Supposedly if you jump at the right time you can avoid them before they snatch you up, but my reaction timing is not good enough for that. The final dungeon is the ice dungeon, and as you can imagine, the main gimmick is slippery floors, but this can be mitigated by equipping some spike boots. Other than that, the dungeon here is pretty standard. You may need to backtrack to find some terminals that can unlock doors in the dungeon, but at least the game isn't playing at half speed through any of it. I can't say I care for this key chase at the end of the dungeon, but it's also the worst thing I can say about it. And that's another section of the base destroyed. Anything else I should know before going on?
Actually, before you go, there's a refrigerator in that destroyed building. It has a spare healing item that you can use in a pinch.
Yeah, I found it, so I just gotta... Matt? Why do the birds have fried chicken in their fridge?
Oh my god.
Of course, there are tons of side quests to take part in. Every island has something to offer in addition to the main content. My favorite side quest in the game is one on Nino Island. There's this woman who wants a pig. Well, as a reward for rescuing a village girl on Calbania Island, she will reward MegaMan with the pig. So take that back to the woman on Nino Island, and she's excited to make some fresh bacon. Wait, hold on. Oh, now I just feel guilty. But that's not all, there's minigames too. On Sol Kadai, you can even participate in roller skate races, just like in the first game. Although you only get money from finishing them, and not even all that much. But there's still more to do elsewhere, like in Poke Village, where the mayor hosts a school that offers up quizzes. No problem, I'm not known as a lore master for no reason. What kind of questions are you throwing at me? Mega Man trivia? Capcom games? I'm no doubt ready for it. Lionel Richie was a member of which group? Which of these 4 album covers show the 4 Beatles' entire bodies? The American president that resigned over the Watergate scandal was... Hold on, how does any of this historical knowledge even exist in the world of MegaMan Legends? This game takes place in the year 8000XX. I don't mind putting aside my suspension of disbelief for some side content, but this isn't fun. This feels like boring school stuff. I'd rather flex my knowledge of rad, cool stuff. The reward isn't even all that great. You get the Z-Saber, which can then be converted into the Blade Arm. I know some people say this is their favorite special weapon, but it definitely is not mine. I just never feel it's reliable enough to use. Speaking of unreliable, there's a special weapon you can only find the parts for by talking to this shady dealer. But there's no way he's talking to a good boy. You might not know it, but there's a morality system in this game where depending on certain things MegaMan does, can lower or raise his morality and change the brightness of his armor. So go kick a pig for a couple of minutes, and then you can buy the parts for the weapon, which is... not very good. It's not at all worth going rogue to get it. The thing is though, having negative morality raises the prices in item shops. So in order to not be evil, you need to donate money to the church in Yoshanka for about 1 million zeni just to get back to neutral. In fact, almost everything in this game is really expensive. Special weapons of course cost a lot for upgrades, but things really add up here. It is possible to increase the amount of zeni you can obtain, but there is a catch. There's the Diggers Guild that allows you to take a test for a new license. With a higher license, not only does it grant access to more side dungeons, but every enemy will drop more zeni for each subsequent license you get. The trade-off is that every license gained also increases the difficulty of the game. There's also no way to trade in those licenses to roll back the difficulty, so this isn't advised unless you really want to get everything in this game. The S-Class difficulty license is already difficult enough to get, but for the difficulty to be raised as a consequence isn't worth it. Arguably some of the worst special weapons, and even the worst optional dungeon in the game are locked behind S-Class requirements. So really the only benefit from raising the difficulty is the greater sum of money that makes it easier to buy health upgrades and such. But those probably aren't necessary if you keep the difficulty level where you started with at the beginning of the game. Anyway, that's going to be it for all the other stuff and Legends 2, so let's talk about what happens at the end of the game. Spoilers and stuff if you care about that. So feel free to bow it now if you still want to experience the game fresh. After finding all 4 keys and returning to the Sulphur bottom, they begin to resonate with each other, and suddenly a hostile takeover occurs. Sarah and Geets have set into motion their plans to take the keys and disable the ship and everyone else on board. With a little time passing by, MegaMan awakens to the sight of Matilda, or as the other ancients call her, Mistress Yuna. The two are arguing about something, which prompts Yuna to enact her counterstrike against Sarah and Geets. Yuna informs MegaMan that Sarah aims to reinstate the carbon reinitialization program. This time it won't be just for one island, but all of humanity that faces extinction. MegaMan joins forces with her to stop Geets. He gets badly damaged in the battle and gets rebuilt by Yuna, while simultaneously restoring MegaMan's original memories. Okay, we have a lot to go through, so let's see what I can piece together. So, a long time ago, there was this great calamity that caused humans to become nearly extinct, I think. So the people of ancient times utilized their technology to leave Earth and go on a man-made moon they named Elysium. And on Elysium, they created a utopia for the remaining humans that was free of inconveniences such as hunger and disease. Commanding the system were 2 designated mother units, which would be Sarah that watched over Elysium and Yuna that watched over the world below. They also created artificial humans, which they called carbons, to inhabit the Earth, which is now called Terra. And they allowed them to live on the islands of Terra and set up civilization for the real humans when they were ready to repopulate the Earth? But Elysium doesn't want Terra to get overpopulated, so they created the carbon reinitialization program to wipe out entire islands of civilizations should they exceed a predetermined capacity. And in the event that the carbons needed to be completely wiped out, then Yuna would grant Sarah 4 keys from Terra to access a place called the Library on Elysium and activate the carbon reinitialization program. MegaMan Trigger was a purifier unit, a high-ranking soldier tasked with destroying aberrant units that disobey the system's command, which is totally not a Maverick Hunter, be quiet. And then he served under the direct command of someone named the Master, who is the last natural-born human. And one day during an indeterminable time in the past, the Master then commands Trigger to take him to Terra. When they arrive, the Master then realizes these artificially created humans are living a more humane existence than he ever had, so he gives Trigger his genetic code for safekeeping. Then Trigger spends the rest of his life to try and fulfill the Master's final wish of destroying the carbon reinitialization program and allow the carbons to continually live in the place of humanity. Trigger then created Data as a conduit to store his memories in the event that someone was able to tamper with Trigger's own memories to forget the Master's command. Sarah, not knowing anything but the order to obey the system, then comes down to Terra with the goal of trying to destroy Trigger and recover the Master's genetic code. But both were severely damaged in a great battle. Yuna then sealed Trigger in the Nino ruins and had his configuration reset, which is why when Beryl found him, Trigger was only a baby. So concerned for the child's well-being, he adopted the boy and named him Rock Volnut, or in the case of the English version, MegaMan Volnut, because Roll's favorite video game character was named MegaMan, but this actually makes the whole backstory more confusing for multiple reasons, believe it or not, so I'm not even going into that. Yuna also seals Sarah on Forbidden Island and hides the location in an ongoing storm. Or was the storm always there and she just put Sarah there because of the storm? Because it was 30 years ago that Beryl and Blucher first got to the island, which would have been perhaps before Trigger and Sarah fought. And the Forbidden Island was just where Yuna lived as a mother unit on Terra? Oh, well, either way, if anyone managed to penetrate the natural barrier of the island, she knocked them unconscious and put them back onto Calinca Island if they were important to the story, or would seal them away in a ball of ice, preserving them forever. One of the people who ended up on the island was Matilda Casket, who was so badly injured that Yuna merged her being with Matilda's to save her life, which is why she occupies that body today and left behind her original body empty. Then 15 or so years later, MegaMan Volnut then travels to Forbidden Island, unintentionally awakens Sarah, who then tricks MegaMan Volnut into gathering the keys for Elysium's library so that she could start up the carbon reinitialization program, which is how the story of Mega Man Legends 2 gets set up and why we are here now. And all of this happened because some guy told some other guy he shouldn't put 2 gears in a robot. After informing Mega Man of this, Yuna then gives him the opportunity to decide if he's going to allow the system to wipe out the carbons, or destroy the system, obeying the orders of the Master. However, there's only one way the game ends, so it's time to go to the final dungeon. Yuna and Gats then go to Calbania Island in order to unearth a space shuttle, and bring aboard Mega Man to travel directly to Elysium.
So the way you actually progress through this dungeon is you need to switch the gravity between normal, low, and high.
How do I do that?
Well, there's a bunch of panels that change it.
I don't see them?
Chris, I'm checking your map. You've passed by them at least like 6 times.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the gravity. It changes something called the gavity.
I'm gonna kill you.
Elysium is the final dungeon in the game. What we have this time is a gravity-changing mechanic. Players can find terminals to shift the gravity between 3 different states: weak, normal, and strong. Each one affects the environment differently and allows access to optional treasures in different rooms, depending on which gravity state is selected. Overall, this is a great ending dungeon. It's big, disorienting, but not overly confusing. It also remixes elements of previous dungeon content together for added challenge. Making it through the whole system eventually brings Mega Man to the abandoned homes of the ancient people, eventually culminating in the arrival of his old master's residence. Now we're entering the final stretch. You first need to overcome the Mega Man tradition known as the boss rush. Except it's not every boss fight in the game, just the major Reaverbot bosses. I know that boss rushes are something that you either love or you hate, but for what it's worth, I think it works best in the context of Mega Man Legends, as you can compare how much you've grown on your journey. So it's a little weird this is the only Legends game to feature one. When Mega Man goes to stop the program in the library, he finds out the carbon reinitialization program has been put on pause. This is when Sarah appears wearing battle armor. She admits that she was jealous of Mega Man for being so close to the Master. It's for this reason she feels some doubt over following through with the system's order. But if she can defeat Mega Man, then perhaps she can let go of these complicated feelings. Sarah, perhaps unsurprisingly, is the most difficult boss fight in the game. She has a ton of fast-moving attacks, and can even mess with gravity to limit Mega Man's evasion. The Shining Laser also isn't ideal this time. It's more prudent to have something that Mega Man can move and shoot with. Being mobile is the key to surviving this fight, although she will transform into a second phase. The most annoying thing about this fight is how the lock-on camera is put into an awful position for pretty much the whole fight, which is a big problem because most of her attacks have a wide attack radius. This boss is rough if you increase the difficulty through the Diggers Guild. Perhaps with a more fixated camera, this boss would have been stellar, but I find myself leaving disgruntled. After finishing off Sarah, she then thanks Mega Man for showing his resolve and fulfilling the Master's wishes. Even though she continued to find such actions illogical, being ultimately defeated is the proof she needs to die without regret. That is until Yuna intervenes, and informs Sarah what's going on. She says that Gat sacrificed himself to give Traeger the advantage by tampering with Sarah's system. Even still, Sarah is the only one that can understand what Yuna has been going through, so she offers her old body so that Sarah can still exist. A request Sarah agrees to. The thing is, they can't rest now. Because Elysium is shut down, something called the Elder System is beginning to reactivate on Terra, so the two need to return to the surface to stop it. There's just one problem. Now MegaMan, Sarah, and Yuna are all stranded. So I have a few questions. For example, how come they can't return to Terra? I get that Gats died and he was the one that merged with the shuttle allowing it to function, but Data seemed to get off Elysium just fine. Did Gats round-trip Data back to Terra and then fly to Elysium again to tamper with Sarah's system? And what the heck is this Elder System we're just now learning about? What kind of threat does it pose exactly? And did the Master know that by destroying Elysium's system it would activate, then threaten the carbons he wanted to live? Well, I don't know. At least MegaMan doesn't seem too worried about it, because he knows that Roll is worried about him. And despite being forced apart, she's going to find a way to come looking for them, no matter what happens. And thus concludes MegaMan Legends 2. Now that I've replayed this game, I have to say that Legends 2 is probably my least favorite game of the Legends series. It's a bit weird to say, as this is certainly the most polished of the 3 games so far. The controls are more fluid, the dungeons more thought out. So many more items are hidden around the world, there's so much world in general to explore. It also, rather unfortunately, suffers from a lot more annoying design. Nothing that I would say are deal breakers or actively make the game worse, but they are just present enough and just droning enough that I don't quite find the same enjoyment that I did with the other 2 games. For Legends 1, I 100% completed that game. I did every side quest, talked to every NPC, unlocked all the difficulties, even upgraded every special weapon to the maximum level. For Legends 2, not in a million years. I went out of my way to at least gather all the special weapons, but I did not bother upgrading them. The Shining Laser has an energy upgrade that cost 9 million Zenny to create, and that's after Roll's 10% discount. Sorry, I'll pass, thank you. When I played this game again recently, I think that Legends 2 is lacking in a certain spice. The special weapons menu in the last game was stylish and communicative. In Legends 2, it looks like just another menu. I do love that the world is so much bigger, but everything feels more disconnected as a result. I realized how much I missed having one island from the previous 2 games and becoming intimate with its characters and secrets. Like when Catalogs got blown up, I felt obligated to help repair it. When Poke Day Village gets destroyed, I really don't care, because I only ever need to come here one time. You even have the ability to travel back to Forbidden Island after the required events of the story, but there's nothing there. You get a bit of lore, but it's not even exclusive to that island. I think it was a missed opportunity to not have a super boss or optional dungeon or something else here. They probably crammed a PlayStation 1 disc with all the content it could store, although it still feels like there should be more here. But hey, don't just take my word for it. Opinions on the Legends series are just as diverse as Legends 2 itself. Take our very own Minimatt as an example.
Alright, so let me start off by saying that MegaMan Legends 2 might be my favorite Mega Man game, and while that may just be my nostalgia talking, I do think this game does some legitimately good things. The controls feel so much smoother than its predecessor, and honestly, I think this is the best that Mega Man has ever felt in 3D. I mean, not that it has much competition, mind you, though it's important to say that this game is far from perfect. Level design in some dungeons just feels clunky or bare-boned, and the game has a lot of places to visit, but they're pretty much pointless once their section of the story is over. And even the music, which is great, isn't as memorable as the first game's soundtrack in my opinion, but when this game shines, man does it shine. Boss fights are just as fun as the first, and although I mentioned the level design could be a bit cumbersome, the dungeons are still a lot of fun to play through, and the variety of each dungeon makes each one stand out. The character interactions are still just as good, and yeah, dang it, this game just oozes charm whenever it possibly can. Look, the game isn't perfect, and sometimes it's not even as good as its first entry, but replaying it again just made me really happy to experience what this game brings to the table, and made me just kind of fall in love with the Legend series all over again, and that's the most important part in my opinion.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. None of the entries in the Mega Man Legends series are bad games. I just have a certain preference, although this one could easily be your favorite. After the credits finish rolling, we get to see a rocket launch. Or at least, an attempted launch. The Caskets, the Bonds, and even Blucher himself seem to have formed a most unlikely alliance to try and build a ship to get Mega Man back to Terra. Data then offers to help speed up the process. And since Data knows exactly how to make it all work, he can assist them in...
You stay out of this, Data! We need to make the cargo hold smaller. We can save space and make it lighter that way.
It doesn't matter! With this new amazing engine I designed, we will have more than enough power.
Your engine? I'd believe you if your engines weren't made from spare parts and needed to be adjusted every 5 minutes.
Not everybody has tons of money to build your kind of engine.
Well, I suppose no battle is as fiercely fought as two women in love. The already unintelligible monkey's speak falls on deaf ears. Perhaps this isn't going to be nearly as easy as we thought. Well, we only need to wait a little longer before we finally see the end of the Halcyon days in Mega Man Legends 3.
Chris?
Yeah, you know, Mega Man Legends 3.
You've heard about Legends 3 though, right?
Yeah, of course, Mega Man Legends 3 for the 3DS. It was announced 10 years ago. Although I didn't get the chance to play it when it came out, but it's Legends, so it's gotta be awesome, right? Matt? Matt?